Happy Saturday, foodie friends and grain-free VIPs, and welcome to today's Slice of the Grain-Free Lifestyle episode. My name's Nina Blake, and I'm here to help you level up your grain-free lifestyle. Please say hello as you see this, and if you catch the replay, please use #replay. All right, our topic today is why don't my grain-free, allergy-friendly recipes turn out right? And I love that you have stepped away from the rote stage of follow the directions to the thinking stage where you are analyzing, because when we start to analyze and focus on the why, all of a sudden our food starts to taste overwhelmingly better. Arlene, thank you so much for that sound check. Everybody, if you could just say thank you to Arlene, because she's kind of my unsung hero, my sidekick. She makes it possible for me to keep bringing you these lives. So thank you, Arlene. I really appreciate it. Okay. So why don't our grain-free, allergy-friendly recipes ever turn out right? Well, it can boil down to three things. You ready? Ingredients, techniques, or equipment. And if you're like, what do you mean? Okay, it's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay not to know. That's what I'm here for. I've spent the last 13 years figuring this out in my free time, and I don't think anybody else should have to spend a decade doing that. If you're like me, your doctors have been like, well, don't eat the foods and you'll feel good. And that's great, but anybody who says don't eat cake on your birthday has never spent a decade missing out on cake at your birthday. So let's just say, for example, you want to make a cake. Okay. And you have a recipe that you're going to follow. But that cake, it tastes a little funny. I mean, that happens, right? So first, we'd look at the ingredients and we'd say, what happened with the ingredients? Have you used those ingredients before? And if the answer is yes, I've used those ingredients before. Cool. Were they fresh? Was there a problem? Let me give you an example of a time where ingredients did not work out for me. It was probably about 8 years ago, and I was developing my very first loaf of grain-free, top allergen-free, yeast-free bread because a relative of mine needed it. So it was going to be a loaf of bread that worked for my needs and for her needs. And I had never baked bread without yeast before. So I was doing my go-to. I was using baking soda. And I had always used Arm & Hammer baking soda. If you're like, that's not Arm & Hammer baking soda, I buy it in bulk and I keep it in a mason jar in my kitchen. Saves a little money. So my Arm & Hammer baking soda, buy it in bulk, keep it in a mason jar in my kitchen. Well, Auntie was not using Arm & Hammer baking soda. Not her fault. She was using another brand. Guess what we learned? We learned that different brands of baking soda have flavor. If you're like, what? Yes, baking soda actually has flavor. And so by her using a different brand of baking soda than I was, she was getting a nasty, spit it out, can't eat it flavor with the bread. Poor lady, right? So when she switched the ingredient from one brand to another, boom, all of a sudden, she was getting bread. And not just any bread, like the type of bread where she's like, I'm out of bread. I gotta make bread again. I can't be out of bread. Because if you're watching this, chances are you probably know what it is to miss out on bread. And I don't want that for you. I don't want that for you. So if you're just joining us, please say hello, drop an emoji. And if you're catching this on replay, please use #replay. We're talking about why your grain-free, allergy-friendly recipes might not turn out right. And the first reason is ingredients. Now, if it's not ingredients, then it might be technique. And if you're like, what's technique? Do you have to go to cooking school to learn technique? No. And how do I know? Because I haven't been to cooking school. I have learned all of this in my kitchen because when I started in 2012 and the doctor said, don't eat grains, don't eat dairy, don't eat eggs, don't eat soy, don't eat corn, don't eat apples. And I was like, holy moly, what's left to cook with? I had to figure it out on my own. But you don't need a PhD to do this. You don't need a PhD to learn technique. The simplest way for me to explain a technique to you is to think about the order of ingredients technique that you might not even know you're using. So in a recipe, let's say you're making chocolate chip cookies. We love chocolate chip cookies, right? Well, the reason it says to cream or to fluff up the sugar and the shortening is so that you can get a fat sugar mixture fluffy enough to integrate the flour. If you don't add your sugar before you add your flour, you're going to get a super dense cookie. So that's technique. Technique is what we do, why we do it, and when we do it. Okay, so what kind of techniques might work? Well, for my VIPs in my VIP recipe box, I have all kinds of techniques in my course, Basics of Grain-Free Bread Baking. I have 10 techniques that we use to get bread. Now, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but I want to show you. See this pretty little crumb here? This is an error, and I'll talk more about that error later. But techniques give us bread that looks like bread. And these little air pockets here in bread, they're called the crumb. And it's technique that allows us to get this. So for example, if you've got my sandwich bread recipe or VIPs in my lectin-free hamburger buns, you know that we let the bread rest. And the reason we let the bread rest is because the water goes from being outside the flour molecule, particle, to inside, and it swells up the flour particles. Okay? Once those flour particles are swollen up, they bake better. And we need the same amount of moisture in a bread, but the bread isn't soggy in the center. So if you haven't pinned this to go back to, please pin this. Facebook does delete these lives, so you're going to want to make sure to catch it on YouTube, and we will get you the link so that you can rewatch it on YouTube. But this is really where it's at. So we talked about ingredients, how ingredients can affect your recipe. And another way that ingredients can affect it, ingredients can change the flavor of your recipe. If you are a cheese lover and you know that dairy-free cheeses are loaded with hidden grains, well, you don't have to put up with those hidden grains. We can make our own cheese at home, right? And so I make homemade mozzarella cheese for my pizzas, cheddar cheese, and I even make an American cheese, which is great on burgers. But those cheeses, even though they're made with coconut milk, they don't taste like coconut because we're neutralizing the flavor of coconut. And in my course, Grain-Free Magic, I teach you how to do that. So if you'd like to learn more about that, just drop magic below. So we've talked about ingredients, right? We've talked about technique, like in the chocolate chip cookies, right? With the creaming, or in the bread with the resting. And those techniques change a recipe completely, right? If you make a bread and you don't let it rest, or for example, a yeast bread and you don't let it rise, you're not getting bread, right? Good things come to those who wait. And the last part is equipment. And if you're like, what? I have to buy special stuff? Well, equipment means what you use. So for example, one of my clients is like, she's beast moding recipes, and she decided she was going to do a prep day, and she was like, she made butter in a day. She made butter, sour cream, cream cheese. She made barbecue sauce. She had prepped a frosting. She had bread in the oven. She was beast moding it, and she wanted to make a mayonnaise. So all the mixing bowls were dirty. And she said, well, I'll just use my immersion blender and I will make the mayonnaise in a mason jar. Cool. The recipe didn't work. And she's brilliant. She's been working with me for months. She knows her stuff. So why didn't the recipe work? she used an immersion blender, and in a mason jar, she couldn't whip up the ingredients enough to get a fluffy mayonnaise. She didn't do anything wrong. She was trying different equipment. In bread baking, and for those of you who are watching with me, I'm so glad you're here with me because I can really show you why it's important to invest in a good stand mixer. This is a dough spiral. This is a dough hook. A dough spiral will knead your dough twice as fast, twice as powerfully as a dough hook, okay? They are not the same, but a lot of recipes are written for the dough spiral. So if you are kneading your dough, for example, and it's not coming out, be aware of that. So my friends, if you want to learn more about how to take grain-free ingredients and make them taste like normal food so that you can finally enjoy your family recipes, I want you to put magic below. And if you're like, I need more than ingredients, I need all my foods, I need to make a complete lifestyle change, I just want it all and I want it now, then I want you to use my calendar link and we'll hop on a call together, and together we will fast track your grain-free journey like my clients have, the way that I've taken myself. Instead of it taking you 13 years like it took me, it's going to take you 1 year. So use that link and I will see you on the inside. Have a fabulous Saturday. I believe you can do this because the possibilities are endless when you break a recipe.